thing where he says that he's advocating for them, and he mimics a lot of the kind of in his mannerisms something that they like. But if the results don't come through in the end, they're just not ready to make him to come back to him and say, you said you were going to do this for us and you didn't do it. He's still the one that they want.
It's such a weird phenomenon, and it seems that at the same time, the media, the mainstream media, by and large, doesn't really understand that that's the case. That really they're responding to the kind of show business aspect of this, the entertainment factor. Maybe it's because they're too close to it themselves and they don't want to think of themselves as part of the show, as part of the entertainment. Do you think that could be why, and why after repeated sending of reporters to diners in the Midwest, they still can't comprehend why these voters would act the way that they do?
Well, reporters have never quite figured out how to cover Donald Trump, and it's a complicated question. But you're right; they have these kind of safaris where they go to the Midwestern diner and they listen respectfully and they repeat what people say. And even when some of the views that are being expressed are abhorrent, they don't render any kind of moral judgment because these are supposed to be the realist Americans. And they've all convinced themselves, these reporters who are in fact coastal elitists who did go to fancy colleges. And it's for that very fact that they think, well, I need to open myself up to these people, to understand them and not judge them. And, you don't see any journalists when Joe Biden was elected, they didn't all troop to, diners in cities to say, like, what are the African Americans who voted so strongly for Joe Biden? What's motivating them? What concerns them? That wasn't something that they felt necessary to do, but they decided that they had to understand the Trump voter. But when we talk about the show, I don't think reporters have figured out how to report on it in a comprehensive way without being part of it. And so there's this, this kind of constant kind of breast beating about, like, are we just helping him? Should we not cover his rallies? Should we cover his rallies? Does it just mean that we're going to be allowing his lies to spread more? They've never quite been able to figure it out. And that's sort of part of his mad genius, that all of the rules that normal politicians follow, like, say, shame, when you tell a lie and it says in the newspaper, by the way, you lied, most politicians will stop repeating that lie because they have some shame. And Trump didn't. And then those of us who do fact checking, we were like, well, what do we do now? We said he was lying and he's still saying it. How many times can we just repeat that he's lying? But I also think it's important on a broad national level. This is not just having to do with rural America, to note that, Trump is not magic. He has this extraordinary hold over rural Americans. But as a general matter, he's never garnered a majority support in the country. He didn't win a majority in 2016. He didn't win a majority in 2020. His party didn't win a majority in 2018. Right. He was the first president in the history of polling to never crack 50% approval rating through his entire presidency. The anti-Trump coalition is very powerful, but the rural base, if he gets back into office, that is what's going to put him there. Because as we argue in the book, they have an unusual leverage that's built into both the Electoral College and the makeup of the Senate and the way that lines have been gerrymandered in lots and lots of key states.
And that's a particular reason why it's important to continue putting one over on white rural voters, because they do have that outsized influence. Like, again, it doesn't seem to come up a lot in mainstream political discourse, but there is a structural advantage, as you indicate, that they have, like, when because they live in states that no matter what the size, no matter what the population, have 2 votes in the Senate and an additional 2 electoral votes as a result, that really tips the balance in their favor. So he can hit those spots and do, incredibly well when it comes to running for president, and incredibly well in terms of having a Senate that is going to support him. But I want to go back for a moment to a point that you raised that really seems to expose the way the media handles this to a degree. Why don't reporters go into diners, urban diners, and find out the needs of African Americans. Why don't they make those journeys? Because it seems like such a default in states like Iowa and South Carolina and New Hampshire. Again and again you see these almost stereotypical inquiries, and yet you see so little on the other side. Why has the media fallen into that trap?
I think a lot of times they are making up for what they think are their past failures. And so when something is a surprise, then it affects people much more. It affects people in the media much more than when the kind of expected thing happens. And so, Joe Biden was favored in 2020. He won. There's no mystery there that reporters feel like they need to unravel. But 2016 was a surprise. And so they all said, oh, my gosh, well, we have to figure out why this happened. And so that's how you get the safaris to the rural diners. But it has never stopped to a great degree. I mean, they may be doing a little bit less of it now, but the sort of fascination with the Trump voter as this species that needs to be understood and whose sentiments and beliefs and resentments need to be plumbed and, kind of analyzed and really given a wider hearing is something that we're still caught in because 2016 was such a surprise. And, African American voters support the Democratic Party. Well, there's no mystery there. And so they don't feel like they need to give those people that kind of extra voice. But there's a lot of ways in which rural whites, especially, are given that kind of extra voice. And I should say what that brings up is that, 24% or so of rural Americans are non-white. They're Black, they're Latino, they're Native Americans. And that is a group that is never talked about. Nobody is going to majority Black rural counties to talk to those people about what they want. And that's why we in our book have a whole chapter on non-white rural Americans. And in many cases, part of the whole narrative about rural whites with some justification is that they are really suffering and they have a lot of problems in their communities, which they do. And we have a whole chapter about that. But also on almost every measure of well-being, rural Blacks and Latinos and Native Americans are doing worse than rural whites are. And guess what? They have all those kind of economic grievances that they can be mad about. But you know what they're not doing? They're not putting on AR-15s and going down to their state capital to intimidate the legislators there. They are not smashing through the windows of the Capitol building when elections don't turn out the way they want. They are not supporting ideas about violent revolution, and their commitment to this democracy has not wavered. And I think that's really important. And that's part of the message that we have in this book is that for all the legitimate grievances rural whites may have, they are expressing them in a lot of the time in a lack of commitment to the democracy. What it comes out as, the form it comes out as is, I love my country, but I don't love our country.
Right.
And that's something you don't see from other groups that are marginalized in some way or have gotten the short end of the stick. They are not losing their commitment to our democracy, which is a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy.
Right.
And so that's part of the why we say that there is such a danger coming from white rural Americans.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because they have received messages overt and subliminal over the course of years, decades, generations, and even centuries that they are more important than this other group of people, that they have special powers above and beyond those of mortal voters, and that consequentially they somehow are imbued with the privilege of being able to tear it all down if they don't get what they want, because so much of the power and structure of control historically has been pitting one group against another group, and they're not getting what they want, so they feel that they have the right to do something like that. And it's really obviously ending up in some very frightening, tragic, and destructive results. We've been speaking with Paul Waldman. He is the co-author, along with Tom Schaller, of White Rural Rage, The Threat to American Democracy. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today on Facepalm America.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for listening to the program. This is a production of Two Squared Media Productions, and you can find out more about that organization at twosquaredmediaproductions.com. I want to thank Ace Elson and Rosabelle Hine for being the producers of this show. And please share a link to this episode on your social media. It helps us grow. Until next time, enjoy the day.